Close to $10 billion has been spent on the management of COVID-19 in Nigeria since the outbreak of the virus. Hamzat reports on how the money was used.
The coronavirus pandemic has revealed the poor state of Nigeria's healthcare sector. It's shown up the dilapidation and the lack of funding of the system. Nigerians are continuing to battle the fallout of the virus. But civil society organizations say a major issue is a lack of transparency around cash meant to fight the pandemic.
The creating of the PTF, Presidential Task Force was excellent. The fact that we're doing debriefings, making Nigerians know what was happening, was quite good, but the handling was very poor. From the national level to the transnational level, we need to really look at service to the people. Getting to the target, environment. A lot of people are now unemployed, and so we need to do more in documenting the people, in having data on the people that are now have fallen down.
We have been at average, and we started slow, especially on the health sector. I have to give it to us that we had just 6 functioning molecular labs at the beginning of the pandemic, but the problem really is economic fallout, which we have not handled properly.
Close to $10 billion has been spent so far, but Nigerians are still hungry, with some of them looting warehouses to get basic needs such as food and medicines. Experts say the development of technology would have gone a long way to help.
Technology should play a bigger part on conditional cash transfer. So I call it conditional cash payment, because if it's a transfer, it will move from one bank account to another bank account, and then citizens can, independently audit how this money is moving.
With huge loans taken to help support the country through the pandemic, the fear now is for the future generations who have to pay back the money.
When Nigeria took $3.4 billion loan from the IMF, part of the conditions that we're going to accountability and transparency was going to be embedded. What we are asking the government is we have signed up to some commitments, you have signed up to some agreements. Just follow them through.
We've had an increase in loan that have been collected both from IMF and other multilateral, but we've not seen a clear-cut strategy from government on how this loan will be paid. For me, how is the government engaging younger people, and particularly how is the government also providing this information on how they'll repay back loan? And as much as we're talking about repaying back loans, how is the government of the day using this loan? Because when you go to the grassroots, a lot of citizens will tell you that they only hear about palliative from radio and TV, but on the ground, there's nothing happening.
After over $5.6 billion from loan agencies, as well as over 2.6 billion naira from federal budgeted allocation, and even 1.8 trillion naira from the Central Bank of Nigeria, an intervention to the private sector to ensure that the COVID-19 pandemic is handled, well, Nigerians don't feel that they got the best of these monies that were earmarked to ensure that everyone is able to cope with the fallout of the pandemic. And moving forward, the Nigerian people would like to see more accountability and more transparency in the disbursement of these funds. In Abuja, I'm Hamzat, Arise News.
Okay, joining us now is Hamzat Lawal, the Executive Director of CODE, and Oluseun Onigbinde, the co-founder and director of BudgIT. Let me start with you because you're right here and you are in BudgIT. Seun, I'll start with you. The money that we're talking about is in billions. Was it money budgeted for? Because I know BudgIT tracks budgets. Was it money budgeted, and how was it spent?
So thank you so much. So in last year, we had a supplementary budget after we had the routine budget, because there was no plan for COVID-19. At the beginning of the crisis, the fiscal part, which is the Federal Ministry of Finance, they did not have the capacity to do a lot. So we saw that at the beginning was a CBN that was providing support to pharmaceutical companies, aviation companies, hospitality companies, just trying to find a way to stimulate the economy and respond properly to the pandemic. As things move forward, there was an economic sustainability plan that is headed by the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, for 2.3 trillion naira. So that's the whole plan for the economic sustainability plan. It should span at least 3 years. But the first tranche of that plan is 500 billion naira. Out of the 500 billion naira, 288 billion has been disbursed for certain programs. And we are asking, and don't forget that we have also had private donations, like what we're having from the COVID, what VSF has done, what private Nigerians have done to the federal government. Also, you also know that they are also the loan company, which is the $3.4 billion that was sourced from the IMF. So that's where you put all of that in play. You're running to.
Did you say $3.4 billion from IMF was taken
as a loan last year? And that was a stimulus to really from IMF to really help us fix what they call the balance of payments issue, because they know that because of oil prices are going to tank during the pandemic, Nigeria was going to face a shortage of foreign exchange. And you can see that our currency has lost value over that period. So right now, the 500 billion is from the supplementary budget, and 288 billion has been spent so far.
Okay, and of course, we're still expecting another supplementary budget yet to be passed for vaccine purchase.
Yep.
Let me bring in Hamzat Lawal. You guys have come up with this figure, $10 billion, having aggregated all that's been, gotten so far. Why would you say it is difficult to actually track public expenditure in terms of accountability? And what would you say needs to be done to institutionalize accountability in Nigeria?
Well, thank you. It's really difficult to track all this money because we don't have real-time data from government on how this money are moving and who are actually the MDAs that are benefiting or accessing this money and the targeted beneficiaries. And we've also put this data side by side what's happening on the ground. Follow the money, have over 9,000 members across all the 704 local government. We're collecting data as we're asking, are this stimulus package getting to citizens on the ground? When we visited the ground with our colleagues at Tracker, following this money, we see in some places where they give conditional cash payment, some people got 15,000 instead of 20,000. Some other people got even less of the amount, and we see where our officials are collecting kickback after paying cash to these people. So there's a lot of loopholes because, again, when you're giving money, and of course this goes against the government's cashless policy. Why are we paying cash in 2021 when we can leverage on a technology tool like East Africa is doing in Kenya, where they have mobile payment platform like M-Pesa? Why are we not building a tool where people with their mobile phone can pay for goods and services and can access stimulus pack? So right now we can access this real-time data, and corruption strive when you don't even have procurement data. Yes, the Bureau of Public Procurement came up with an emergency procurement plan for government to ensure that during emergency, when they procure, there will be some sense of transparency and accountability. We have the open government portal, but yet we don't have real-time data. We can access government information on this. Mind you, remember the other time Connected Development and CERAP wrote a Freedom of Information letter, and that's when government responded and said they've spent 30 billion and they have 5 billion at that time remaining in the Office of the Accountant General. But then they didn't even give us breakdown on who benefited from this 30 billion and how this money moved from government account to help citizens cushion the effect of the pandemic. We cannot be fighting a pandemic and fake news at the same time, and government is not providing access to information.
Hamzat, your organization is all out to help, to support the government in helping to track and follow the money as it is being spent. It is in the interest of the nation. So have you used all possible avenues to try and access this information and you failed? Is that the situation? In freedom of information, which is an act which is allowed in Nigeria.
Yes, we wrote to the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. We wrote to the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs. We've written to the Ministry of Finance. We've written to the Ministry of Health. We've written to all the frontline agencies that are taking the lead on COVID-19. We've also written to CACOVID. And I'm excited that Connected Development and BudgIT for the first time hosted a public event where we had the Minister for State and Budget and Planning. And it was today we got the figures that 288 billion was released, and he gave us a detailed breakdown on what other ministries, departments and agencies access. And over 50% of this money went to the Ministry of Agri. So again, yes, we've leveraged on all the institutional framework that we have, policy and regulatory framework like the Freedom of Information Act, like the Open Government Partnership, framework that government has signed up to. And this was what even gave us leverage to sit on some steering committee before the government accessed the IMF loan. But government is not honoring, or they're not even following the rule of law to ensure that citizens have real-time access. And mind you, the Freedom of Information Act have what you even call proactive disclosure. So before even we write you an FY request, why not just publish it? Today you see in the UK, in the US, government has aggregated this data on a singular platform. Why don't we have a platform in Nigeria that gives a detailed breakdown of how much is coming in, how much is going out, and where is this money going to, and for what purposes, and who are the beneficiaries of this money? When we get this, and if we get this, then we can conduct a social audit, independent social audit, and rebuild back public trust between government and her citizens.
Bring it to Oluseun here in the studio with us. Well, in spite of this huge amount, it is mind-boggling. $10 billion. Not even one vaccine has been bought yet, which means that none of this amount really has gone to the purchase of vaccine, because we're expecting a supplementary budget to purchase vaccines. Are you able to tell us exactly what are the specifics? In which areas did this $10 billion go into? And how do we, a question I asked earlier, how do we institutionalize access to information to reduce misinformation?
Yeah, you're right on that. So, firstly, we must unbundle this to know that there is a $3.4 billion from the IMF. There's a 2.3 trillion, so that's somewhere around $6 billion. So maybe put that together, that's around $9 billion.
Yeah, we know those figures because you mentioned them earlier. And which areas specifically did it go into education? Did it go into food, palliatives?
Agriculture.
I mean, recall that NSAS really revealed a lot about
so the
palliatives.
2.3 trillion has not been fully divided to say this is exactly where it goes to. And that also speaks to Hamzat's point. The 500 billion, 288 billion has been spent. A significant part of that has been spent on 4 things: agriculture. There's a huge push by the federal government to invest in rural roads and connect rural farmers to urban centers, or to make them feed into the rail system that is being built. I mean, if that's part of what they call an economic stimulus, we wait to see that. There's also from investment on mechanization. There's some interest to buy some knockdown tractors from Brazil. That's in the pipeline. Part of it also is given to FEMA to do some reconstruction also, or resurfacing of roads across the country. And also the federal government invested in molecular labs in 52 public health institutions in Nigeria. Okay. So these are one of the major investments that we have seen that's come out of the 288 billion naira. I think the federal government has not done greatly in communicating the impact of the work he has done so far.
Oh, okay. Well, we want to say thank you very much, Oluseun Onigbinde, the co-founder and director of BudgIT, and of course to you as well, Hamzat Lawal, who is executive director of CODE. Thank you very much, guys. I'm sure this conversation is not ending today. We still have more.
Absolutely.